The old woman in room 12 has predicted 47 deaths. Every single one came true last night. She stopped predicting and whispered mine. I've worked as a night nurse at Willowbrook Senior Care for 3 years, long enough to understand that death has a rhythm, a schedule, a way of announcing itself before it arrives. You hear it in the quiet halls after visiting hours. You feel it in the stillness of rooms where someone used to breathe. Eventually, it stops shocking you, until something breaks the pattern. Mrs. Helena Crane broke it. She arrived on a Tuesday in October. State intake, no family listed, no emergency contact. The paperwork said she'd been found living alone in a condemned apartment building on the edge of town. 6 months without electricity. 6 months without running water. No explanation for how she survived. Just an old woman with pale skin, cloudy eyes, and a stare that lingered a little too long. The first night she arrived, the other nurses pulled me aside. "Don't listen to her," Maria said, gripping my arm harder than necessary. "She gets in your head." I laughed it off. Every facility has at least one patient everyone warns you about. Someone difficult, someone strange. I didn't understand what Maria meant. Not until I was assigned to room 12. Mrs. Crane was already sitting upright when I walked in, as if she'd been waiting. Her white hair fell loose around her shoulders, long and uneven, like it hadn't been cut in decades. She didn't look surprised to see me. She looked prepared. Her eyes followed me as I checked her chart, as I adjusted the 4, as I moved around the room. When I finally looked back at her, she smiled. It wasn't warm. It wasn't friendly. It was knowing. 3 weeks, she said quietly. I paused. "I'm sorry." "Mr. Peterson," she continued. "Room 8, 3 weeks." I waited for more. An explanation. A joke. Instead, she closed her eyes. Heart attack. 2:34 in the morning. Something in her voice made my stomach tighten. "He'll try to call for his daughter," she whispered, "but she won't make it in time. He'll be holding her photograph when he goes." I forced a smile and nodded, like you do when patients say strange things. I wrote it down later as confusion. Possible dementia. That's what professionals do. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling she'd planted. That night, during rounds, I stopped by room 8. Mr. Peterson was asleep, breathing evenly. On his knit-stand sat a framed photograph of a young woman, his daughter. I told myself it was coincidence. 3 weeks passed. I'd almost forgotten what Mrs. Crane said when the call light went off. Room 8. I ran. Mr. Peterson was clutching his chest, gasping for air. One hand fumbled for the phone. The other was wrapped tightly around something pressed to his chest. The photograph. "My daughter," he rasped. I called the code. Started compressions. Someone shouted the time. I glanced at the clock on the wall. 2:33 a.m. The monitor flatlined. 2:34. He was pronounced dead at exactly 2:34 a.m. His daughter arrived 20 minutes later. When she saw the photograph still clutched in his hand, she collapsed against the wall. "He always said he'd be holding my picture when he died," she sobbed. "He always said that." I stood there long after she was led away. Then, slowly, I turned and looked down the hallway. At room 12, the door was closed. But for the first time since I started working nights, I didn't want to open it. That morning, when my shift ended, I went home and tried to sleep. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Mrs. Crane's smile. That thin, terrible smile. Like she'd known something I didn't. The next night, I brought a small notebook to work. I told myself it was for observations, charting. I didn't plan to use it. But as I passed room 12, I heard her voice again. Soft, calm, certain. The woman with the red scarf, she said from inside. 5 days, I stopped walking. My hand hovered over the door handle. And before I realized what I was doing, I pushed the door open. Mrs. Crane was sitting in her wheelchair, facing the window. The room was dark, except for the faint glow of the parking lot lights outside. She didn't turn around. "Who are you talking about?" I asked. "The woman with the red scarf," she repeated. 5 days. My voice came out quieter than I expected. "Who is that?" "Mrs. Ramirez, room 15. Her tone was calm, almost bored. "Stroke, Thursday morning, 6:17. She'll wake up, try to call for help, but the words won't come." A cold sensation crept down my spine. "She'll reach for the emergency button," Mrs. Crane continued, "but her hand won't work anymore." I swallowed. "How do you—" "She wears a red scarf every day," Mrs. Crane said, still staring out the window, "even to bed. She's afraid of drafts." There was a long pause. "She won't be wearing it when they find her." I didn't say another word. I just backed out of the room and closed the door behind me. That night, I started the notebook. I wrote down everything she'd said. The date, the time, the details. 5 days later, on Thursday morning at 6:17 a.m., the call came from room 15. Mrs. Ramirez had suffered a massive stroke in her sleep. She'd tried to reach the emergency button. You could see where her hand had dragged across the sheets, stretching toward it, but she never made it. And her red scarf was lying on the floor beside the bed. After that, I couldn't ignore it anymore. Over the next 3 months, I documented everything. Mr. Washington, pneumonia, 6 weeks. She said he'd ask for water in his final moments, but his throat would be too swollen. She was right, Miss Chun. Peaceful passing in her sleep. 5 days. Mrs. Crane said she'd be smiling, dreaming of her childhood home. When we found her, there was the faintest smile on her lips. Mr. Davis, fall in the bathroom. 2 weeks. She said he'd slip on a bar of soap, hit his head on the sink. Security footage confirmed every detail. 14 predictions, 14 deaths. Every single one accurate. The other nurses started avoiding me. They knew I was listening to her. They knew I was writing everything down. One night, Maria cornered me near the supply closet. "You're only making it worse," she said. "The more you believe her, the more power you give it." "Give what?" I asked. She shook her head. "Whatever she's connected to, whatever she's channeling. Stop feeding it with your attention." But I couldn't stop, because Mrs. Crane wasn't just predicting deaths anymore. She was predicting the exact circumstances, the exact timing, details no one could possibly know. It was like she was reading from a script that had already been written. If you were in my position, you'd want answers too, because once you see something impossible happen once, you can call it coincidence. Twice, you start to wonder. 14 times, you start to feel like you're standing in the wrong place, in a story that's already decided how it ends. So I started asking around. Most of the staff refused to talk about her. Some just shook their heads and walked away. But there was one CNA named Jessica. She'd worked at Willowbrook longer than anyone. I found her in the break room during a quiet stretch of the night shift. She looked nervous even before I said anything. "You've been talking to her," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yeah," I admitted. "I have." Jessica sighed and glanced at the door, like she was afraid someone might be listening. "She's been here 8 months," she said quietly. "But the prediction started before that." "What do you mean?" Jessica pulled out her phone and opened an old news article. "Local woman claims she can predict deaths." There was a photo. Mrs. Helena Crane, younger, standing outside a rundown apartment building. She told her neighbor his wife would die in a car accident, Jessica said. 2 weeks later, it happened. She told the mailman his mother had 6 months. Exactly 6 months later, she passed. Why didn't anyone believe her? Jessica gave a hollow laugh. Some people did. That's the problem. She leaned closer. People started coming to her, asking about their loved ones, asking about themselves, and every time she gave them a date, it happened. A chill ran through me. So why is she here now? Jessica's expression darkened. Because someone asked her something she shouldn't have answered. My stomach tightened. What did she predict? Jessica lowered her voice. A murder, she swallowed. She told a man his business partner would kill him. Gave him the exact date, the exact method. He went to the police, but they couldn't arrest someone for a crime that hadn't happened. She paused. 3 weeks later, he was found dead in his office, stabbed. The business partner confessed. Said he'd been planning it for months. I felt my head spin. So she didn't stop it. She just knew. Jessica nodded slowly. She doesn't change anything. She just sees what's already been decided. There was a long silence between us. Finally, I asked, "What are you going to do?" Jessica didn't answer right away. Her hands were shaking. "She looked at me last week," she whispered, "and gave me a date." My blood went cold. "What did she tell you?" Jessica reached into her pocket and pulled out her keys. Hanging from the keychain was a small pine tree air freshener. "She said 9 months," Jessica said. 9 months from last Tuesday. She said I'd be in my car, and I'd see headlights coming straight at me. Her voice cracked. She said I'd have time to think, this is it, before impact. And the last thing I'd see would be this. She held up the pine tree. "I bought it 2 days ago," she whispered. After she told me, I didn't know what to say. Jessica looked at me, eyes wide. "She knew you'd come asking questions tonight," she said. "She said to tell you something." "What?" Jessica swallowed. She said, "Some doors are already opening." A cold weight settled in my chest. "And that you should ask her about yours." I didn't sleep that morning, not even for a minute. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw a door in the dark, just standing there, silent, waiting, slowly creaking open. And I kept thinking about what Jessica said. Some doors are already opening. By the time my next shift started, my hands were still shaking. I told myself I wasn't going to ask. I told myself I'd stay away from room 12, that I'd keep this professional. But fear has a way of pulling you toward the very thing you're trying to avoid. Before I realized what I was doing, I was standing outside her door. Room 12. The light inside was off. Only the faint blue glow from the window lit the room. I knocked softly. No answer. I pushed the door open. Mrs. Crane was in her rocking chair by the window, exactly where I expected her to be, like she'd been waiting for me all night. "Hello, dear," she said without turning around. "I wondered when you'd come." My throat felt dry. "Jessica said you wanted me to ask about my door." "Sit down." It wasn't a request. I sat in the chair beside her bed. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The room felt heavier than before, like the air itself didn't want to move. Then she turned toward me, and for the first time, her eyes weren't cloudy anymore. They were clear, sharp, ancient. "Do you want to know how it works?" she asked. I nodded. "When I was 7 years old," she said calmly, "I drowned." The words hit harder than I expected. Fell through the ice on a frozen pond. I was under for 4 minutes before they pulled me out. "But you survived," she smiled. "Did I?" A chill spread through my chest. "They brought my body back," she continued. "But something stayed behind in that cold, dark water. And something else came back with me." She turned back toward the window. "I see doors now," she said. "Everyone has one. Invisible to normal eyes, closed tight, usually. But as someone's time approaches, their door begins to open." My heartbeat grew louder in my ears. "Just a crack at first," she continued. "Then wider and wider." She lifted a thin finger and traced an invisible line in the air. "When it's fully open, they step through." "Through to what?" I whispered. She was silent for a moment. "I don't know," she said. "I've never gone through my own door." "Not yet." A long pause. "But I can see through other people's doors. I can see what's waiting on the other side. And somehow, I know when they'll open." I swallowed. "That's not possible, isn't it?" she said softly. "You've seen the proof. 14 times already. 47 in total." My hands tightened around the edge of the chair. "You can't just tell people when they're going to die." "Why not?" she asked calmly. "Would you prefer ignorance?" "That's not a gift," I said. "That's torture." "Is it?" she replied. "Mr. Peterson got to hold his daughter's photograph. Ms. Chun died smiling, dreaming of home. They had peace because they knew." Her voice soft. "Because they accepted it." "And Jessica?" I asked. "What peace is she supposed to find?" Mrs. Crane was quiet for a long time. Finally, she said, "She'll make her peace. Or she won't. That's not my concern. I simply tell them what I see." I stood up. "You're wrong. You have to be wrong about some of them." "I've never been wrong, dear," she said. Then she looked straight at me. "And I'm not wrong about you." My hand froze on the doorknob. "What did you say?" "You wanted to know about your door?" She smiled faintly. "It's opening." A cold pressure filled my chest. "I can see it behind you, even now," she continued. "Just a crack of light, growing wider." I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. 16 days, Mrs. Crane said softly. "Saturday, 11:47 at night. My legs nearly gave out. I grabbed the door frame to steady myself. "No," I whispered. "You're wrong. You have to be wrong about this." "I'm never wrong." "But you don't know everything." "You can't know." 16 days, she repeated. Saturday night, 11:47 p.m. Her voice was calm, certain, final. "You'll be at home. You'll hear a sound that makes you freeze. And in that moment, you'll understand I was right." "What sound?" I asked. "What happens?" She turned back to the window. "That's all I can see. The door is only cracked open. As we get closer, I'll see more. I should have left. I should have run. But I was rooted to the spot. please," I whispered. "Please tell me you're wrong. Just this once." "I can't tell you what isn't true," she said gently. Then, for the first time, her expression softened. "But I can tell you this," she said. "Some people fight their doors, change their routines, hide away. Pray it won't happen." She slowly rocked in her chair. "It never works." "Then why tell me?" I asked. "Why torture me with this?" She looked at me with something almost like kindness. "Because you deserve to know. You've been kind to me. You've listened. You haven't looked at me like I'm a monster." She paused. "And because in 16 days, you'll have a choice to make." A knot tightened in my stomach. "What choice?" "You'll know when the time comes." I don't remember leaving room 12. I don't remember driving home. All I remember were those words repeating in my head. 16 days Saturday, 11:47 p.m. And the sound I didn't know yet. The sound that would tell me my door was finally open. Last night I called in sick the next day, and the day after that, I couldn't go back to Willowbrook. I couldn't face room 12. Couldn't look into those eyes again and wonder what she was seeing behind me. 16 days, that was all I had. At first I told myself it was impossible. There had to be a mistake somewhere. A case where she'd been wrong. A prediction that never came true. So I started searching. Old news articles. Forums. Archived police reports. Obituaries. Anything with her name attached to it. And I found them. A man in Cleveland. She told him he had 8 weeks. Exactly 8 weeks later, brain aneurysm. A woman in Pittsburgh. 3 months. Car accident. Same day she predicted. A teenager in Philadelphia. 6 months. Pneumonia complications. Down to the hour she'd said. There were dozens of them. People who'd crossed paths with her over the years. Some believed her. Some didn't. None of them escaped. Not one. By day 5, I stopped sleeping. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw it. A door behind me. At first, it was barely open, just a sliver of light. But every night, it opened a little wider. By day 7, I'd stopped eating. What was the point? Food tasted like cardboard. Water made my stomach turn. Everything felt distant, unreal, like I was already halfway out of this world. By day 10, I was a mess. I closed all my curtains, stopped answering my phone, turned off the TV. The only thing I watched was the clock. 15 days, 14 days, 13. Each number felt heavier than the last. Maria called me on day 12. I let it ring. Then it rang again. And again. Finally, it went to voicemail. "I don't know what Mrs. Crane told you," Maria's voice said. "But please, don't let her get in your head. She's not God. She's not fate. She's just a disturbed old woman who got lucky a few times." I almost laughed. 47 times wasn't lucky. 47 times was impossible. 48 counting me. On day 14, 2 days before my predicted death, I made a decision. I wouldn't be home on Saturday at 11:47 p.m. I'd be somewhere else. Anywhere else. If Mrs. Crane could only see what happened at that specific time and place, maybe I could prove her wrong by simply not being there. I packed a bag, booked a hotel 3 hours away. I'd leave Friday night, stay gone all weekend. It was foolproof. It had to be. But Friday afternoon, my phone rang again. "Maria," this time I answered. "You need to come back to Willowbrook," she said. Her voice sounded tight, urgent. "Tonight, I can't," I said. "I'm leaving town." No, listen to me. Mrs. Crane's been asking for you. She says she sees more now. She says the door is opening wider. A cold weight settled in my chest. What does she see? She won't tell anyone but you, Maria said. But she told me to pass something along. My grip tightened on the phone. What? Maria hesitated. She said running won't help. She said Saturday at 11:47. You need to be exactly where you're supposed to be, or something worse happens. My heart skipped. Worse? How can death get worse? I don't know, Maria whispered. She just kept saying you have a choice, that you have to be home, that if you're not. Her voice cracked. She said someone else will go through a door instead, someone close to you. My hands started shaking. Who? She won't say. She just keeps rocking in that chair, staring out the window, repeating the same thing. Maria's voice dropped to a whisper. He needs to choose. He needs to be there. If he runs, the door finds someone else. I sat in silence after the call ended. My mind raced through every face I knew. My sister, my parents, Maria, Jessica. What if the choice wasn't about avoiding my own death? What if it was about accepting it? To save someone else? I thought about Mr. Peterson clutching his daughter's photograph. About Ms. Chun smiling in her sleep. They'd accepted it, made their peace. Was that what I was supposed to do? Slowly I walked over to my bag and unpacked it. I would be home on Saturday at 11:47 p.m., and I would face whatever came through that door. Saturday morning, I woke up with an odd sense of calm. This was the day my door would open fully. I spent the morning cleaning my apartment, not because it mattered, but because it gave my hands something to do. I called my sister just to hear her voice. Didn't tell her why. I wrote letters, one to my parents, one to Maria, one to Jessica. In hers, I told her maybe Mrs. Crane was wrong. Maybe we could change things after all. But even as I wrote it, I didn't believe it. By evening, the calm was gone, replaced by cold dread. 11:47 p.m. was coming. I made dinner, but couldn't eat it. Turned on the TV, but couldn't focus. Every few minutes, I checked the clock. 8 o'clock p.m. 3 hours and 47 minutes. 9 o'clock p.m. 2 hours and 47 minutes. 10 o'clock p.m. 1 hour and 47 minutes. The seconds felt louder, heavier, like each one was a footstep getting closer. At 10:30, my phone rang. Unknown number. I stared at it until the third ring. Then I answered. Hello? There was a pause. Then a voice I recognized instantly. It's time to come back, Mrs. Crane said. At 10:30, my phone rang. Unknown number. I stared at the screen as it vibrated in my hand. For a moment I considered letting it go to voicemail. Then I answered, Hello? Silence. Then a voice I knew instantly. It's time to come back, Mrs. Crane said. My entire body went cold. What? To Willowbrook. You need to be here. Not at your apartment. My grip tightened around the phone. You said I'd be home. You said, I said you'd hear a sound that makes you freeze, she interrupted. I said you'd understand in that moment. Her voice sounded different now, urgent, almost afraid. But I can see more now, she continued. The door is opening wider, and it's not opening where you think. My chest felt tight. What are you talking about? If you stay home, she said, you'll hear what happens from far away, and it will destroy you. A chill ran down my spine. "What happens?" "Room 12, she said. 11:47 p.m. Be here." "Why?" I asked. "What happens?" There was a long pause. Then, for the first time since I'd met her, Mrs. Crane sounded human, desperate. "Please," she whispered. "Trust me, just this once. Trust me." The line went dead. I sat there, phone still pressed to my ear. The room felt suddenly too quiet, too still. I looked at the clock. 11:15 p.m., 32 minutes. Willowbrook was a 25-minute drive. If I left right now, I'd barely make it. My mind raced. What if she was lying? What if this was another manipulation? What if I left the apartment and died on the road instead? But another thought crept in. What if she was telling the truth? What if the real danger wasn't here? I grabbed my keys and ran. The night air hit me like ice as I sprinted to my car. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the keys trying to unlock the door. The engine roared to life. 11:18 p.m., 29 minutes. I pulled out of the parking lot and onto the empty road, pressing the accelerator harder than I ever had before. Every red light felt like an insult. Every slow car in front of me felt like an obstacle placed there on purpose. My eyes kept flicking to the clock on the dashboard. 11:25 p.m., 22 minutes. What was waiting at Willowbrook? What was she trying to show me? And why did she sound scared? I ran 2 red lights, took a corner too fast, nearly clipped a curb. But I didn't slow down. 11:37 p.m., 10 minutes. The building finally came into view at the end of the road, its windows glowing faintly against the darkness. I pulled into the parking lot at 11:44, 3 minutes to spare. The night receptionist barely looked up as I rushed past the front desk, down the hallway, past the quiet rooms, past the soft beeping of monitors and the low hum of fluorescent lights. Room 12 was at the end of the corridor. The door was open. Light spilled into the hallway. I checked my phone as I reached the doorway. 11:46 p.m., 1 minute. Mrs. Crane was sitting in her wheelchair, facing the window. Maria stood beside her, crying. "What's going on?" I asked, breathless. Maria turned toward me, her face pale. "She said you'd come," she whispered. "She said you had to be here to understand." "Understand what?" Mrs. Crane slowly turned her wheelchair to face me, and for the first time since I'd met her, she looked afraid. "I lied," she said quietly. My stomach dropped. "What?" "About your door," she whispered. "It wasn't opening. It was never opening." The words didn't make sense. "But I had to get you here," she continued. She glanced at the clock on the wall. "In exactly 30 seconds, you would make a terrible mistake." "I don't understand." "The prediction wasn't for you," she said softly. "It was never for you." The clock ticked. 11:47 p.m., and then I heard it. Outside, a violent screech of tires, metal slamming into metal, glass shattering. A crash. Right in the parking lot. Maria gasped. I ran to the window. Below, under the harsh white security lights, a car had slammed into the light post. The front end was crushed. Steam poured from the engine. The driver's door hung open and slumped over the steering wheel. Was a body. I stared down at the wrecked car. Steam curled into the cold night air. The headlights flickered weakly against the concrete wall. The driver's door hung open, and the body behind the wheel wasn't moving. A horrible realization began to form in my chest. "No," I whispered. Behind me, Maria's voice broke. "It's Jessica," she sobbed. "She said she'd be early tonight." My legs felt weak. Jessica, 9 months, Mrs. Crane had told her. But it hadn't even been 2 weeks. I turned slowly to face Mrs. Crane. She was looking at me with something that almost resembled shame. "I lied to her," she said quietly. The words hit like a slap. "What?" "Her door showed me 2 weeks," she continued. "But I told her 9 months. I needed time. Needed her to think she was safe." My stomach twisted. You manipulated her death?" "No," she said softly. She gestured toward the parking lot. "Jessica's door opened tonight. That was always going to happen. But you were supposed to be in that parking lot at 11:47. The realization struck like a physical blow. "I would have been walking to the building," I whispered. "Yes," she said. "You would have died. Jessica would have survived, injured, but alive. She would have lived her 9 months." My chest tightened. "But I changed it," Mrs. Crane continued. "I lied to you, made you believe your door was opening, made you paranoid enough to arrive early. You saved my life." She shook her head slowly. "I traded one life for another." Silence filled the room. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. "Why?" I asked. "Why me instead of her?" Mrs. Crane looked at me for a long time before answering. Then she reached out and took my hand. Her skin felt cold and fragile. "Because Jessica's door was already open," she said. "It was close, very close, when someone's time is near. Fate has 100 ways to collect." She squeezed my hand gently. "I could have saved her tonight, but tomorrow, next week, next month, something else would have taken her. A fall, a sickness, another crash." Her voice softened. "But your door wasn't opening. Not for decades. You still have time. You still have life ahead of you." Her eyes looked tired. "I've watched 47 people die," she whispered. "I've just seen their doors open and couldn't do anything but tell them it was coming. This was the first time I could change who went through." The sirens were close now. Flashing red and blue lights danced across the walls. "How many more doors do you see?" I asked quietly. Mrs. Crane turned back toward the window. "Too many," she said. "Far too many. I quit Willowbrook that night." Jessica's funeral was the following week. I stood in the back near the door and left before the service ended. Maria transferred to another facility not long after. But before I left town, I visited Mrs. Crane one last time. She was in her rocking chair, as always, facing the window. "I see your door sometimes," I told her. "In my dreams." She smiled faintly. "Soon enough, dear. Soon enough. And what do you see when you look through it?" For the first time since I'd met her, her eyes filled with tears. "Water," she whispered. "Cold, dark water. The same water I drowned in when I was 7. Her voice trembled. "It's been waiting for me all these years. But I'm not afraid anymore. When my door opens, I'll be ready." I left Willowbrook that day. 6 months later, Maria called me. Mrs. Helena Crane had died peacefully in her sleep. No prediction, no warning, just gone. They found her in her rocking chair, facing the window, a slight smile on her face. On her nightstand was a note, written in shaky handwriting. It said, "Tell him he made the right choice. Tell him to live." I still don't know if she meant me or herself. 3 weeks ago, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single piece of paper. On it was a date and a time, 47 months from now, 3:22 I don't know who sent it. I don't know if it's real. But I know one thing. Mrs. Crane once told me fate has 100 ways to collect, and she was never wrong. So I'm living, making the most of every day, every hour, because maybe that was the real gift she gave me. Not knowing when I'd die, but knowing I still have time to live first. Last week I passed a nursing home on my way to work. On the 3rd floor, an old woman stood in the window. She was staring right at me, and she was smiling. That same knowing, terrible smile. I don't know if it was her. I don't know if that's even possible, but my hands haven't stopped shaking since. And I can't help wondering, what if some doors never really close? If this story stayed with you, if it followed you into the quiet moments after it ended, subscribe, because some stories don't stop when the video ends. And tell me in the comments, would you want to know when your door opens? Or would you rather live in the dark?